think first things first, I think before even we look at the ROI calculations, I think it's super important to have the need for a specific project. I think it's super important that, we understand the need, we define the need, we define the scope, we define the stakeholders involved in the project, and also the feasibility. I think it's super important to also figure out, the feasibility study. Every time someone comes up with a consulting project, everyone wants, I think, things in the air. Everyone wants the sky, and most importantly, I think you have to really settle down. If that specific project is the need of the hour, and what kind of value the project is going to get on the table. It could be financial value. It could be say branding, it could be related to customer success, it could be related to like acquisitions of new customer, or just changing the perspective the way you think. See, once you have these basics into the place, of course, then you start with the entire ROI calculation. What do you do in the ROI? Of course, first, once the scoping is ready, I think you need to have, I would not say that, you will have all your 100% of the scopes ready and extremely well defined. It is practically not possible. And so in that specific case, you need to have a basic scope ready, which defines your major roles and responsibilities. You contact a few suppliers or a few consulting companies to figure out, this is the scope. And what is the budgetary quotation? What is the budgetary value to achieve this specific course? And what is the timeline which is required, to achieve a specific scope? Basis the timeline received, basis the scoping which you have, then you have something on the table. It's also super important to figure out what happens if there are delays, because at the end of the day, the consulting companies will charge you by the hour. And so if the timeline gets deferred, how would the consulting companies be compensated? And so these are some things, which you need to put everything into perspective before even you start the specific project. In terms of ROI, as I specifically mentioned, just focusing on the ROI, of course, you have an expenditure, and the basis is expenditure. What is the value, which will be added to the table, and what would be the period of time, whether the value which will be added, whether it could be financial benefits. Let's take an example. If you're getting a consulting company for one of the cost saving initiatives, to identify the cost saving initiatives, within a specific department, or improve efficiencies of, say, supply chain or operations. I think this is pretty straightforward. Consulting company, you pay X amount. The why should be, the cost savings should definitely be more and spread over what period of time. In terms of increasing efficiency, it could be manpower, it could be, reduction in raw material cost, reduction in production cost, reduction in logistics, supply chain costs. So all these things in perspective comes into the picture. So when you're looking at a more of a financial angle, the return on investment is comparatively easier to calculate. What is more difficult to calculate is hiring a consulting company to increase the brand awareness in the market, or get more customers, or improve the, what I would say, the deliverables to the customer, which not necessarily will be tangible, which has to be intangible. So all these intangible benefits I think you need to somehow convert it into tangible benefits. And it's not the easiest of the tasks to be done. I think you need to take a lot of assumptions into the picture. Say, assume, if I want to improve the brand awareness, how do I do it? Of course, hiring consulting company, the consulting company says, do X, Y, Z things. And you do these things, say the sales goes up from, say by 7%. But how do you attribute that 7% increase in sales to the efforts which you've done? Because it could be because of various other initiatives which you have taken. So it's a bit of a tricky situation, but but to put things in perspective, you can have some kind of approximations, and without doing the specific exercise right from the start itself, I think you should not be going for, hiring, whether it's a consulting company or whether it's a new initiative, whether it's a new software. These points needs to be taken into consideration. And sometimes what happens, you might not have any cost benefit. But in these cases, even though you want to hire the consulting company, uh, to do and you're paying for this, you need to figure out, what other initiatives which you're taking internally to offset this cost delta. So that's something, which you also need to be prepared of. So I know it's a long answer, but this is the actual on-ground situation which needs to be taken into consideration. Why? If I'm not going to get a value out of something uh, before, for something which I'm going to spending, I should avoid such instances. See, it's a very, this, as we say, I think no company is here to do charity. So if I'm investing in something or someone or some supplier, the first question which any company needs to ask is, what is the value which I'm getting out of it? Otherwise the investment doesn't make any sense. And it's also important to figure out not how much I'm going to get back, by when will I be getting it back? The timeline is also important. See, now I think the last few years you would have seen the inflation rate globally has gone high. So maybe in your ROI calculation you would have assumed an inflation rate of say 1 or 2%, possibly in Western Europe and the US. But suddenly you see that the inflation has gone up by say 5% or 6%. So your return on investment would be eroded with this 4 or 5% increase in the inflation. These are some things which also needs to be taken into consideration if there is a definite delay in the process. And if a company cannot answer the question why and how much before the start of the project, the company should not even think about moving into a new project. So this needs to be, so you need to be very specific in this specific case in terms of the why and the how. And also people need to be made responsible and accountable on who have actually recommended these options to the management. I think there needs to be some kind of accountability. It needs to be a part of the KPI. I don't know, it should be linked to the bonuses. And so people just do not come in with the random data, and people actually invest time and energy to study this data, because at the end of the day, you're spending companies' money. First things first, I think any consulting companies, when they come over to meet a customer, see, first of all, of course, if there is a need, the customers will reach out. Or if you have certain links, leads, you reach out. You need people within the system, you reach out. That's the first basic thing. What I would recommend is no consulting company should come and try selling their processes, or selling their initiatives or billable hours. What I would really want is for them to understand the issue, understand what the customer wants, and basically demonstrate a value in terms of what is that they can add, how is that they can add an value, to the larger process. A lot of times, what we've seen is, you hire a consultant or you get in touch with a consulting company for X work, but they try coming and selling something a why work. I mean, and in this specific case, you start losing trust. I mean, because I'm calling the person to solve a specific issue rather than focusing on the specific issue. They are trying to put across something, which is something is not the need of the hour, and we know that we will not be investing time and energy. So rather than working as suppliers or consulting company, they should try working as partners, and and they should be honest enough to say if it is possible or it is not possible. For me, honesty, trust, understanding customers' needs, and most importantly, being flexible in the entire way of moving ahead, working together as a team so that they can make the ROI calculations, make a business
Mm-hmm.
case is something super important. This is for me the best way to get, to move ahead. I think the one thing which I would like to say is how geopolitics have changed the supply chain. Geopolitics and pandemic have changed the supply chain. So, uh, so this is the entire hot topic, and with such uncertain situations going ahead in the future, how it's you can dwell with all the specific data, but there are certain situations which are not in your control. How do you still evolve your internal supply chain is a question which needs to be figured out.